Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris, and welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. For this week's Thoughtful Thursday, I want to address something that seems to be on the rise, and that is people in leadership reacting poorly to employees who are unable to work a scheduled shift. In the retail and service industries, it's become so common there's even a Reddit group where screenshots of text message conversations between leaders and employees are posted, and everyone gets riled up. Let's start with some data. First, retail and service industry jobs are where you'll find the intersection of two types of employees, those in careers and those in jobs they would consider temporary stepping stones to something else. Retail and service jobs have always been some of the best places for people to make some money while going to school, as a second source of income in the evenings and weekends if needed, or to gain some type of specific experience in the workforce in order to springboard into something else. And because leadership careers in these industries have historically been some of the best paid jobs regardless of education level, many people either gravitate towards them or find themselves moving into them from what they thought was something temporary. Second, turnover in these industries has always been higher than the overall average of the workforce, but it's currently at an all-time high. It's becoming increasingly difficult for companies in this space to retain people. And I'm not just talking about talented people, I mean any people. Why is this? It's a combination of a few things, but the biggest and most recent catalyst, as reported by many former employees, is that the general public, i.e. their customers, have proven over the last 2 years there's no line they won't cross when it comes to how they'll treat employees they encounter. That the expected occasional jerk has moved from a weekly or monthly occurrence to, in some cases, a several times a day occurrence. Making matters worse is the feeling that, in many jobs, the leadership has placed such a tremendously high value on the customer experience that they fail to act as advocates for their own employees in the face of egregious treatment. That somewhere along the line, people started taking the old adage, the customer is always right, literally, instead of as an acknowledgement of aggregated market conditions that it was always meant to be. On the surface, this makes sense, even though it can't be excused. Many leaders were poorly trained from the start, and they're now woefully ill-prepared to support and develop and lead in this post-ish pandemic world. Many of them are just as burnt out as their employees, but don't feel they have the luxury of quitting because of financial obligations that many of their employees may not yet have. And since most of these leaders have transitioned from jobs into careers, they're more likely to prioritize their employment over things in their personal life, a trade-off most non-leadership employees are much less likely to make. The combination of all this can lead to interactions where leaders have unacceptably emotional reactions to employees who inform them that they won't be able to make it to work that day. So what have I seen, and how should leaders respond to these employees? I'll answer that, but first I want to give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, so last night I was reading through these interactions that occurred over text message and saw things ranging from basic guilt trips all the way to threats of termination and even personal insults. These leaders cross many lines, and they've clearly convinced themselves that an employee being unable to work is catastrophic rather than a minor inconvenience. And I know it's frustrating. I know it means you'll be busier than you otherwise would have been. I know sometimes employees lie about the reasons they aren't coming in. I know it can be hard not to interpret it as a personal affront, but I can assure you it isn't one. It's just a person prioritizing something over their job. And even though you as a leader with work ethic and a career may scoff at this, there are things you'd prioritize over your job too. Just because that list might be smaller than the lists of your people doesn't mean there isn't one. So how should you respond in these situations? This might be the easiest answer in all of leadership, because it's really only one answer and it applies to all circumstances where an employee tells you they can't come to work. You got a pen? Here it is. I hope everything is okay. Please let me know how I can support you. That's it. That's all. I hope everything is okay. Please let me know how I can support you. But this employee called it the last 4 Saturdays in a row. Okay. But they requested the day off and were denied. Then they tried to get it covered, and now they're conveniently not feeling well. Well, it sounds like you should have seen that one coming. None of this matters. I hope everything is okay. Please let me know how I can support you. Why? Because no amount of guilt tripping, threatening, insulting, or even taking a tone that implies you're rolling your eyes is going to make them change their mind and come to work. That ship has sailed. All it's going to do is make them never want to put any effort into their job going forward above what is needed to not get fired. They've lost all respect for you as a leader and are just going to go through the motions until they find another place to go on their own, and you'll be cleaning up the mess for the next several months until they leave. Now, I'm not saying you need to allow people to walk all over you and break the rules. Whatever the rules are, follow them. Your company has a process for documenting unexcused absences, and you have a responsibility to make sure your employees know that policy and understand where they fall on that spectrum. But those conversations with your employees don't happen over a text message when they're calling out. Those conversations happen in the office, when they're on the clock, in a way that is completely void of emotions. It's likely they'll be allowed several of these instances before any disciplinary action is taken, let alone being able to fire them. Taking it personally, when you weren't even considered as part of the decision, is just your ego, and it will damage your relationships and eventually your own ability to progress in your career. Many of the conversations I read through had follow-up stories showing that the leader had been rightfully fired for the way they treated the employee. But not getting in trouble yourself isn't the reason to be doing this. It's just not how you should treat other people. Everyone has priorities. Work is one of them, but it's not the top one. And if an employee is working part-time while going to school, it's probably pretty far down that list. So treat people with the kindness you'd want if something legitimately needed to take you away from work too. I promise it'll all work out. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.